I have a question. Who's ready? Who's ready to stand up for Canada with me?
Hey everybody, it's Jamie. It's just before 2 a.m. after election night, and while we are still waiting on many final results, here's what we do know. Mark Carney and the Liberals will form government, but we don't know yet whether that's going to be a majority or minority. The vote share so far is really split. Liberals with 43% of the vote, Conservatives with 42%. I'm here to make sense of what we know so far with Aaron Wary and David Coletto. Aaron is a senior reporter with CBC's Parliamentary Bureau, and David is the CEO of Abacus Data. We've been hosting a live stream all night. I think it was, 4 hours, guys? Yep. So I'm very grateful that they're not so sick of me that they're here right now. And we're going to record the podcast episode. Thank you. Thanks for sticking around, to both of you.
This was fun. Thanks for having us.
It was actually a pretty good night.
It was good.
Very exciting election. Aaron, how would you characterize how the night unfolded?
I mean, it's a remarkable result for a few reasons. I mean, first, to state the obvious, a few months ago, this was close to unfathomable that the Liberals would be winning with Mark Carney as their leader.
Canada's next government will be a Liberal government. It is not yet clear at this hour whether it will be a minority or majority. Because of some of those close races we were talking about, this marks a fourth Liberal mandate. Very rare in Canadian politics. But the Liberal Party...
It's also, it had been 25 years now since any party broke 40% of the popular vote. And tonight we have two parties over that threshold.
Yeah.
And so far as I can tell, that hasn't happened since 1930, that we've had two parties above 40%.
Huh.
And
1930, hey?
Yeah.
Wow.
It's remarkable because if you had told Pierre Poilievre a few months ago, hey, you're going to win 42% of the vote, he would have taken that in a second.
Mm-hmm.
And if you told the Liberals they were going to win 43% of the vote, they would have said, wow, that's a huge majority.
Yeah.
And so it's a remarkable victory for the Liberals, but it doesn't quite, this isn't a sweep. This doesn't completely sweep aside the concerns that were raised by Pierre Poilievre and the Conservatives. And it leaves a big challenge ahead for Mark Carney.
Mm-hmm. David, it's probably worth us acknowledging off the top here the reason why both these parties were able to get so much of the vote. And just explain to me what happened with the NDP and the Bloc to a lesser extent tonight.
Well, I think we saw, particularly the New Democrats, really their support bottomed out to really the lower end of what the polls were saying would happen, where they're, getting barely 6% of the vote, down at this stage when we're recording 7 seats, leading or elected. And that's that may be the worst performance for the New Democrats in their history, both in terms of share of vote and seats. And so, it's a remarkable election for many reasons that Aaron and you already alluded to, but one of them is that the Bloc, they lost, I think, close to 10 seats. So they too lost quite a bit. They will still be an official party in the House of Commons. And interestingly, our analysis before this election was that the Liberals' majority, which is still potentially there, would go through the province of Quebec. And they did everything they needed to do in Quebec. What fell short was Ontario, which surprised, I think, me and many others, in that the Conservatives did much better in parts of the province, particularly around the GTA, which we didn't expect, because the GTA did not move as one.
Yeah.
Today.
Well, do you guys want to flesh that out a little bit more?
Yeah.
I just saw you doing a bunch of stuff fun.
Yeah, because
pointing at a bunch of things on your computer.
We spent a lot of time together in the last little while. We were looking at a riding like Windsor West, which was an NDP seat. There was several elections ago. There was a close call, but it was one of the safer NDP seats. And there was a thought. Mark Carney went there a couple times during the campaign, and you could talk yourself into, okay, that's a seat where the NDP vote's going to collapse and the Liberals will win. And what happens tonight is the Conservatives win it. And I haven't checked, but I'm going to guess that's the first time the Conservatives have ever held Windsor West. It is at least the first time they've had it in a long time. And for those kinds of ridings to go Conservative is a huge surprise.
Mm-hmm.
If the Liberals don't get to a majority, it'll be because they lost ridings like that. And it's one of those things where you want to be able to dig into it afterwards to go, okay, what happened there? Why did Pierre Poilievre resonate in a place like that? And what does it mean going forward?
I overheard you saying boots over suits, right?
Mm-hmm.
Is that what you were talking about? You were talking about that riding?
Well, that's one of them, right?
Yeah.
Where we're looking at this sort of, it's part cultural, it's part professional, what kind of work you do, and I think the Conservatives have made a concerted effort for many years now to speak to voters who typically live in those kinds of ridings. These are folks who work in factories, work in natural resources, forestry, and I think Pierre Poilievre really did speak to them. And it wasn't just Windsor. We saw the interior British Columbia, all but maybe Kelowna, which is I think is moving Liberal for a different reason, go all Conservative. You're seeing parts of Vancouver Island where the Conservatives have picked up a few seats, and even in Northern Ontario, they've made some gains. So there is and some of the GTA ridings. I look at Vaughan Woodbridge, for example, high proportion of Italian Canadians there, very different than other ridings in the Greater Toronto area. There is, I think, a higher proportion of folks who live in that riding who probably do the kind of work that Pierre Poilievre is saying he's going to represent.
Mm-hmm.
And that dignity of work, the dignity of, I think, is embedded in his narrative. And I think he's going to look at tonight, despite not winning this election, and feel they've made some progress.
I want to come back to him because we saw him speak, but we just saw Carney speak. Aaron, do you think Carney sufficiently acknowledged in that speech just how split the country is?
I mean, I don't know that there were a couple moments when he seemed to be reaching out to different parts of the country.
During this short campaign, I went to Saskatchewan and Alberta a couple of times, even though, we're Liberals. It's tough. It's tough out there. I grew up there. But I went because I intend to govern for all Canadians. And au cours de cette campagne, plusieurs Québécois et Québécoises.
Throughout this campaign, Quebecers opened their doors to me and gave me their confidence. And I have been deeply touched by that, and I want to thank you.
He talked about unity.
Humility underscores the importance of governing as a team in cabinet and in caucus, and working constructively with all parties across Parliament. Of working in partnership with the provinces and the territories and with Indigenous peoples.
He talked about kindness.
Let's put an end to the division and anger of the past.
I don't know that he explicitly got into the idea of, 42% of the country voted for somebody else.
Mm-hmm.
And that's as I said earlier, like that's not something we're used to in this country, where, the party on the losing end, or the party that doesn't get to form government, had that much support. And it reminds me a bit of after 2019, when there was a big emphasis on Trudeau having to reach out to people who didn't vote for him, particularly in the West. And I think that's going to be part of how Carney is watched now.
Mm-hmm.
Like, I don't want to overstate things too much. Like, a win is a win.
Mm-hmm.
And by the time all the ballots are counted, it's possible that the Liberals could have a majority here, and a majority would give them a full 4 years to govern. There's a big difference between a majority and a minority. but he is going to have to, when he talked about change during the campaign, that is something that he's now going to have to really demonstrate, because we now know that there's 42% of the of voters were actually really looking for change this time around. And so, Mark Carney's sort of dual mandate now, or dual sort of assignment, is to deal with Trump and to also show change.
I was just going to add, in listening to the Prime Minister's speech, I felt he got close to the edge of being somewhat divisive when he started talking about Canadian values.
I chose to enter politics because I felt we needed big changes in this country. But big changes guided by strong Canadian values. And those include 3 values that I want to highlight this evening. Humility. It's Canada after all. Ambition. It's Canada after all. And unity. It's Canada.
And the way that he wanted to approach the policy, that it came to a point where you were basically, I heard maybe, that those who didn't vote for us don't share Canadian values.
Yep.
And I think he's going to have to be very careful, regardless of whether he gets the extra 6 seats that he needs to have that majority or not, in that the country's quite divided, and because we have big things to do. And if you're going to bring the country together and be able to go down to Washington and say, the country's behind me, I think he's got to find a way to not divide us more. And I don't think that was his intent tonight, but I think if you listen to that as the loser tonight, you might have been saying, oh, there he goes again. He's judging us for now not supporting him.
Let's say we wake up tomorrow and it's a minority. And sorry if this is a completely relevant question for everybody waking up now. But what would governing look like for Carney moving forward?
So some of this really does come down to the math.
I've already, I will say, made Aaron do so much math. So
way more math than I was ready to do. If he's sitting at 166 and the NDP's at 7 and the Greens are at 1, that can get you over together. That can get you over the majority threshold. So if you could have the 1 Green MP and the 7 NDP MPs voting with you, you'd have some comfort, or you could at least sort of carry on. And I think it's safe to say, after Jagmeet Singh resigned tonight as NDP leader, and with the NDP knocked down to 7 seats, they're not in any mood to go to an election anytime soon.
Mm-hmm.
But it does, I don't think any of the opposition parties, the bloc, the NDP, are going to rush into a confidence and supply agreement again. Because I think the conventional wisdom would be that didn't work out so well for the NDP. And so he is going to have to look for support from 1 or 2 parties. And there will be a grace period to some extent, because nobody wants to go in an election right away. But eventually that grace period will run out. And so the idea that he could have, 4 years to govern, it's probably more like he can plan on having maybe 2 years.
Yeah. Before we move on to talking about the Conservatives more, let's just spend a minute talking about Jagmeet Singh and his speech. So he lost his riding tonight, his Burnaby riding, and then he gave what I think was a very gracious speech.
Tonight, I've been forward a party leader that I'll be stepping down as party leader as soon as an interim leader can be appointed.
He was very emotional. He broke down a couple of times, especially when he's talking about his kids and his wife, which is very understandable.
Now, I could not have done this incredible job without, here's a point, give me a second to break down a bit. I couldn't have done it without the incredible support of my wife, Kidden. Also, I might break down this part because, and Anhad and Dani, my daughters, remind me of the future. God damn it, that we are fighting for.
What did you make of the speech? how do we think that he will ultimately be remembered here, David?
I thought the speech was very Jagmeet Singh. I think it was authentic. I think he was speaking from the heart. I don't think anyone, from a political performance perspective, this election will go down as not very good. But I don't know if it was entirely because he wasn't himself. I think he was himself, and I don't think that's what Canadians were thinking about. In terms of what he's going to be remembered for, I think it's always hard to say the moment a few hours after an event like this. But I think he will be remembered as someone who broke barriers, who spoke to young people early on when he was leader in a way that I don't think still very many leaders do, using TikTok and other kinds of things like that. And he got a lot of things done that not many NDP leaders can look back and say they did. And as much as that may have caused his not ultimate demise, I think that will be what history looks back and says, if these programs survive, dental care, pharmacare, anti-scab legislation, these are things that New Democrats have fought for years. Jagmeet Singh will be able to say, look, I helped get that done.
Aaron?
Yeah, I mean, I think it's sort of a odd legacy in that politically, in terms of just winning seats, it's not great. They won fewer seats in 2019 than they'd won in 2015. They basically held steady in 2021, and now they've been knocked down to 7, or we'll see where they finally come in. So politically, he has a pretty bad record, but substantively, in terms of policy, he may end up having one of the stronger records of any NDP leader. So it's a very odd mix of sort of, real policy achievements because of that confidence and supply agreement and very little political success.
Can one of you just answer very quickly for me? They've lost official party status. What does that mean?
So in the House of Commons, you have to have 12 MPs to qualify as an official party in the House. And if you have 12 MPs, then you get a certain number of you get a certain number of spots on committees, you get a certain budget. It is a significant advantage. They are going to be, unless they can convince the House of Commons to give them official party status, that it will be a significant obstacle to overcome.
And if they are the balance of power, you can imagine that might be something that they are able to negotiate.
Get from. Yeah, it's interesting. All right, let's talk about the Conservatives. In many ways, kind of the most interesting storyline of the night. We just watched Pierre Poilievre give his speech. He does not sound like he's going anywhere.
The promise that was made to me and to all of you is that anybody from anywhere could achieve anything, that through hard work, you could get a great life, you could have a nice, affordable home on a safe street. My purpose in politics is and will continue to be to restore that promise.
How would you describe what we heard from him tonight? David, do you want to take that first?
Well, I think he repeated a lot of the same message he said, and it was an attempt to empathize with the half of the country that I think saw what he and his party were offering as the best and most appealing option, which was that scarcity mindset of housing's too expensive, food's too expensive, life's too hard. And, I think he's going to be able to look at this and know, yes, he lost this election. But if he gets 42% of the vote, that's not that far from what I thought was kind of an artificially high number of around 45 when they were 25, 27 points ahead of the Liberals. So they did not do anywhere near as bad as I think some thought they might. And I think whether he holds his riding or not, which as we record this, that's still not clear. I can't say he's safe, but I think his political future is far more secure right now at this moment, if he wants it to be, than probably before. And I think it's a reflection of how appealing what he has been saying and his ability to tap into a deep frustration. I've been saying for a few weeks now that this election has not just been about Donald Trump, that for half the country, it is about something else. It is about the day-to-day life being more difficult, and a feeling that many Canadians had that the Liberal government, first primarily led by Mr. Trudeau, did not sufficiently deliver and try to make it easier. Even if it wasn't fully their fault, they didn't think that they understood it. And so I think it's a complicated path forward for them, but I think they'll feel that they made progress towards their ultimate goal, even if the certainty that we almost all felt at the end of 2024 about a Conservative victory in 2025 didn't come true.
Aaron?
Yeah, I thought tonight's speech sounded like the start of the next campaign. Like he's getting a head start on 2027 or 2029, whenever the next one comes. Tonight during the live stream, we were talking about, maybe there's a ceiling on Conservative support of 39%. Well, it looks like he's beat that. In terms of just popular vote, he's going to end up, it looks like he's going to end up above Stephen Harper's figure in 2011.
Which gave him a
majority. And in almost any other world, 42% or 41% of the vote would be enough for a majority. And so there's that. But then you also kind of have to balance that with they were leading by 20 points.
Yeah. I was just...
So he's both...
He's still lost. He's still the loser tonight, right?
He's both probably the first political leader in Canadian federal history to blow a 20-point lead, and maybe the first in decades at least to come in with 40% of the vote and not win.
Yeah.
The way the Conservatives read this result and how they read this result will be fascinating to see what lessons they take from this, whether they decide they need to change something or whether they think we're on the right track and we just need to keep going.
I mean, one of the things I think I've seen even initially comments online is if you look at the coalition of voters they've pulled together, the future of that coalition looks brighter than the future of the Liberal voter coalition, which is older. Primarily, right? Student Vote, Civex is an organization every year they come out with. They do this big vote. 900,000 students in elementary and high school voted, and the Conservatives won the popular vote across the country among elementary and secondary students.
Oh, that is interesting.
Right? We know that, although there's some mixed signals in the polling, that they were doing substantially better than any Conservative Party did among younger voters of age. And
particularly among young men, right?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. So I look at this and I say the long-term future of the Conservative Party feels very different than when we were talking about them a decade ago when they lost to Justin Trudeau, which was a party of older voters, a party of and so in that way, if you're looking for a silver lining in a loss, that's another one I think for the Conservatives that the Liberals should be asking themselves. What does our future look like if our a coalition is getting older?
The campaign itself was rife with all of this infighting, right? Conservative power broker type Corey tonight accused Poilievre's team of campaign malpractice.
Blowing a 25-point lead and being like 10 points down is campaign malpractice at the highest level. And I'm sorry to have to point that out, Conservatives, but, that is the actual reality.
He was on them about not getting on the Trump question sooner and on Poilievre himself for being too Trumpy. Doug Ford kind of inserted himself in this election a couple of times, but he's talked about how
if Corey was running that campaign, I don't think Mr. Poilievre would be in the position he's in right now. But it's still a lot of time left. We still have debates. At the end of the day, the people will decide which way they want this country to move forward. But sometimes the truth hurts.
Tonight we heard Conservative MP Jamil Javani really go after Ford.
When it was our turn to run an election, he couldn't stay out of our business. always getting his criticisms and all his opinions out, distracting our campaign, trying to make it about him, trying to position himself as some kind of political genius that we needed to be taking cues from.
Was it him specifically? Was it his campaign?
And that he was essentially a hype man for the Liberal Party.
He has taken the provincial Conservative Party and turned it into something hollow, unprincipled, something that doesn't solve problems. He's glad-handing with Chrystia Freeland, having coffees and lattes with Mark Carney, and I'm sitting here saying...
And that he's not doing a great job running the province of Ontario.
And it's not like this guy is doing anything particularly well. I mean,
You did used to work for him.
I did. I'm speaking from experience. I tried to fix problems in this province, and he kept getting in his way and all his goons around him all the time. They wouldn't make anything better. And now we're seeing him because this guy's a political genius because he beat Bonnie Crombie and Stephen Del Duca. And now we got to sit around getting advice from him? No.
He really did not hold back. And so is this kind of what we can expect from the coming days, you think?
Yeah, I mean,
yeah.
It will be interesting to see how much the federal Conservatives on Pierre Poilievre's side try to make the case that they were on the right track all along, and that this result sort of supports what they were doing, and whether the other side is able to say, well, maybe if you'd been more on our track, you would have been on the other side of the equation, and you wouldn't have 42% of the vote, you'd have 44 or 45% of the vote. And so there's that. I'm speaking of it in some kind of high-minded political science course. There's that conversation, and then there's just going to be the very personal, hey, what the heck? You were out talking trash about us. The hurt feelings could be fascinating to watch.
Yeah.
In terms of how just interpersonally they handle each other.
What do you think this really becoming a two-party country at the moment is going to do to our politics?
So I will always caveat election results with every time we think the political system has changed forever, it changes again 4 years later. 2011, the Liberal Party was dead. And the NDP and the Conservatives were now going to dominate federal politics. And 4 years later, Justin Trudeau was prime minister. That said, you could look at this and say, yeah, it really does look set up for a conservative liberal fight for a while. And I do think there's some kind of outside risk that leads to, further polarization, where instead of it kind of being a multi-party system where voter sentiment is kind of spread out, that it really does become very distinct views on the Liberal side and very distinct views on the Conservative side. Because I think the other thing that happened in this campaign is that Pierre Poilievre ran the most conservative campaign in recent memory, in decades probably. And, the differences on something like climate change between the two parties is so vast now and so stark. And so, coming out of this campaign, do the Conservatives sort of come back, on an issue like climate change and get the parties get closer together again, or are we now in this kind of pitched trench warfare where two parties with very different views are going against each other?
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, I as the political scientist, I think Canada's party system is kind of the anomaly, right? You should have never had a centrist party survive as long as we have. And so when Jack Layton made the breakthrough in 2011, everyone was positing that this is the end of the Liberal Party and that we're going to see this kind of polarization. And 4 years later, Justin Trudeau, breaks through and breaks that theory apart. So I agree. Like, we can never. I don't think it's wise of us to be predicting the demise of the NDP, because I always think that I look at it from, as a pollster, what's the demand that the public is asking of its political system and of its political leaders? And that demand will shift. And I think there will be a space for it. The question is Mark Carney's instinct to move to the center and stay there? Or does he realize that he actually has to occupy some of the left? Because there's no one else really now to speak for that very loudly. And I don't know how that's all going to work itself out. But I do think the risk is, if we're putting our, the benefit, take a political strategy off and say what's in the best interest of the country.
Sorry, I feel like there's been so much talk in the last couple of days, and I'm like, this all this seems so bad for democracy. All these strategies and everything.
Yeah,
They shouldn't have put out
it's
a
not
platform.
even democracy.
That's
It's
not
more
good
of like
strategy. Yeah.
we are facing
Yeah.
one of the biggest threats our country and the world has probably faced in a very, very long time. And I think what the verdict of Canadians was a split decision, and not the state, at least at this point, the stable. Even if Mark Carney wins a majority by 1 or 2
Yeah.
seats, it's not that stable.
I think we can say definitively right now, it's not going to be a romping.
Certainly
majority.
not.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
That leaves us in a position of not weakness, but not a, this is not sending a strong signal to Washington that Canadians have a very clear sense of where they want this country to go. And so that's what I'm left with thinking about. Can our system find a way to, Poilievre today said in his speech, I will, in the best interest of the country, find ways to work together. But that only can go so far in a system where it's designed to be head-to-head, sword lengths apart.
Yeah. Okay. Guys, I think we're on hour 7 now. Such a pleasure to spend this time with you. I want to thank you so much.
It was lovely.
Thanks for having me.
All right. Well, that is all for today. I'm Jamie Poisson. Thanks so much for listening. Talk to you tomorrow.